Stephen A. Smith Show. Before I get on out of here, I had to talk about a story that's very, very important. And albeit indirectly.
What if the biggest story in sports wasn't a game-winning shot, but a catastrophic mistake made in a quiet boardroom? A decision so baffling, so self-destructive that it sent the entire world into a state of disbelief and exposed a bitter truth lurking just beneath the surface of a beloved sport. This is the story of how a single name left off a list triggered a firestorm, and how one of the most powerful voices in media, Stephen A. Smith, stepped forward to confirm everyone's worst fears about what was really going on behind the scenes. The world of women's basketball was on a historic upward trajectory, lifted by a singular generational talent who was shattering records and bringing millions of new fans to the game. Arenas were selling out. TV ratings were exploding. The WNBA was finally getting the mainstream attention it had fought for decades to achieve. The upcoming Paris Olympics were meant to be a coronation, a global showcase for this new era. The stage was set for Team USA to present its most electrifying roster ever, headlined by the phenom everyone was talking about, Caitlin Clark. Then the list dropped and a seismic shock wave ripped through the sports world. 12 names were on the Olympic roster, a collection of incredible athletes and established legends. But the one name that had driven the entire conversation, the one name that guaranteed global viewership, was inexplicably missing. Caitlin Clark was out. The immediate reaction wasn't just disappointment. It was pure unadulterated confusion. It felt like a glitch in the Matrix, a press release with a typo. So, how could the most popular, most watched, and most impactful player in the sport be left at home? The internet exploded in a firestorm of outrage. Fans, analysts, and even casual observers who had just started following the sport because of Clark were left asking the same question. What on earth were they thinking? This wasn't just a roster choice. It felt like a deliberate act of sabotage against their own sport's growth. The machine that was supposed to promote its brightest star had just unplugged itself, and nobody could understand why. And as the initial shock wore off, it was replaced by a burning need for answers, setting the stage for a controversy that would spiral far beyond the confines of the basketball court. But that was only the beginning of the chaos. The official explanation would soon prove to be even more unbelievable than the snub itself. The official explanation landed with a thud. The selection committee, a group of seasoned basketball minds, offered up a series of justifications that felt weak, rehearsed, and completely tone-deaf to the reality of the situation. They spoke of a need for veteran experience on the international stage. They pointed to concerns about Clark's defense and the supposed risk of her high-turnover style of play. They emphasized the importance of team chemistry, hinting that a rookie, no matter how talented, might disrupt the delicate balance of a roster filled with established players who had played together for years. To the public, these reasons sounded like flimsy excuses designed to cover up a much uglier truth. Experience? Clark had just carried her college team to back-to-back national championships under the brightest lights imaginable. Chemistry? The whole point of a training camp is to build chemistry. But behind these sanitized corporate talking points, a darker, more compelling story was being told in whispers and online forums. The real reason, many believed, had nothing to do with defense or turnovers. It was about jealousy. It was about politics. It was a calculated move by the old guard to keep the new phenom in her place. Rumors swirled that some veteran players on the team didn't want Clark there. They were tired of her getting all the media attention. They were resentful of the Caitlin Clark effect and felt their own accomplishments were being overshadowed. This wasn't about winning a gold medal. It was about protecting their status and controlling the narrative. The snub was a power play, a message sent from the established elite to the rising star. You may have the fans, but we still run this league. And while the committee hid behind their official statements, the court of public opinion was already reaching a verdict. A verdict that was about to be shouted from the rooftops by the most explosive voice in sports media. The public's frustration was a simmering volcano, and it was about to erupt. The decision was so universally panned that it created a rare moment of unity across the typically fractured landscape of sports commentary. But one voice rose above the rest, cutting through the noise with blistering clarity and righteous indignation. That voice belonged to Stephen A. Smith. On his show, First Take, Smith didn't just disagree with the decision. He condemned it as an act of flagrant stupidity. He wasn't just talking about basketball. He was talking about business, about progress, and about the colossal failure of leadership. Stephen A. Smith effectively confirmed what millions of fans were already thinking. This was marketing malpractice of epic proportions. He laid it out in simple, brutal terms. This is not about basketball, he thundered. This is about the marketing of basketball. He painted a vivid picture of the golden opportunity Team USA had just fumbled. Caitlin Clark, he argued, wasn't just a player. She was a global phenomenon, an engine of growth for the entire sport. Leaving her off the team was like launching a rocket, but forgetting to put in the fuel. And he called it one of the dumbest things he had ever seen in sports history. A decision so short-sighted that it bordered on deliberate self-harm for the WNBA and women's basketball. His rant went viral, echoing across social media and becoming the definitive take on the controversy. He wasn't just a talking head. He was channeling the collective rage and disbelief of the public. He gave a voice to the millions who felt that the sports gatekeepers were actively working against their own best interests. Stephen A. Smith didn't just report on the story. He became a central figure in it. His words acting as a powerful confirmation that this wasn't just a bad roster decision. It was an unforgivable blunder that exposed the petty politics threatening to derail a revolution. But to truly understand the scale of this blunder, you have to look at the numbers, and the numbers are staggering. To call Caitlin Clark a popular player is a profound understatement. She is an economic force of nature. The Caitlin Clark effect is a well-documented phenomenon that has completely transformed the financial landscape of women's basketball. Everywhere she goes, she prints money. During her final season at Iowa, her games became the most watched women's college basketball games in history, with the national championship drawing more viewers than the men's final for the first time ever. When she was drafted into the WNBA, that effect followed her, magnified. Her Indiana Fever games, both home and away, became instant sellouts. Teams that typically played in smaller arenas were moving their games against the Fever to massive NBA stadiums just to accommodate the unprecedented demand for tickets. Her jersey became the top-selling jersey for any athlete in any sport on the planet immediately after the draft. TV ratings for the WNBA skyrocketed, with networks fighting to broadcast Fever games. She was single-handedly bringing millions of new eyeballs to the league. This is the context that makes the Olympic snub so incomprehensible from a business perspective. The Olympics are the biggest marketing platform in the world. Having Caitlin Clark on that stage in a Team USA jersey would have been a commercial goldmine. It would have drawn in millions of casual fans who might have never watched women's basketball otherwise. It was a chance to solidify the sport's new elevated status on a global scale. Instead, the selection committee chose to leave their single greatest marketing asset at home. Stephen A. Smith called it a stupid decision. But it was more than that. It was a decision that actively rejected growth. It was a choice to turn down free global-scale promotion that money can't buy. In a world where sports are as much about business as they are about competition, Team USA had willingly left a billion-dollar opportunity on the table, and the reasons appeared to be rooted in something far uglier than strategy. The tension wasn't just happening in boardrooms or on television set. There was growing evidence that the animosity toward Clark was very real and playing out right on the court. For weeks leading up to the Olympic decision, a narrative had been building around the physical and aggressive way opponents were treating the rookie star. While tough defense is part of the game, Some of the plays against Clark seemed to cross a line, feeling less like basketball and more like a campaign of intimidation. The most glaring example was the incident with Kennedy Carter of the Chicago Sky. In a moment that had nothing to do with the flow of the game, Carter delivered a vicious blindside shoulder check to Clark, knocking her to the floor. The play was a cheap shot, a non-basketball move that was widely condemned. What made it even more telling was Carter's refusal to answer questions about it afterward and her teammate Angel Reese being caught on camera celebrating the foul from the bench. This incident became a symbol of the resentment some players seemed to harbor for Clark. It wasn't just about playing hard. It felt personal. Commentators and fans began to speculate that this wasn't just rookie hazing. It was a reflection of a deeper jealousy. These players who had worked for years in relative obscurity were now seeing a rookie come in and instantly receive a level of fame and fortune they had never experienced. The hard fouls, the trash talk, the off-court shade, it all painted a picture of a league divided. This on-court hostility provided crucial context for the Olympic snub. It made the chemistry argument seem more plausible, but in a much more sinister way. Perhaps the committee left her off the team not because she wouldn't fit in, but because they knew some of the established veterans actively didn't want her there. They chose to appease the incumbent stars rather than embrace the future, sacrificing their best chance at global exposure to avoid locker room drama. And as this ugly picture came into focus, the person at the center of the storm did something no one expected. With the world raging on her behalf and a storm of controversy swirling around her, everyone waited to see how Caitlin Clark would react. Would she lash out at the injustice? Would she release a statement condemning the decision? Would she feed the fire of a story that was already burning out of control? She did none of those things. Instead, she responded with a level of grace and maturity that was almost as shocking as the snub itself. When asked about being left off the team, Clark was the picture of professionalism. She expressed no anger, no bitterness. She said she wasn't disappointed and that it gave her something to work for. She praised the women who did make the roster and wished them well in Paris. She effectively took all the venom out of the situation and refused to play the victim. This response was in its own way the ultimate power move. By taking the high road, she made her detractors look small and petty. While others were engaging in on-court cheap shots and off-court drama, she was focused on basketball. Her calm, measured reaction only strengthened her public image as a role model and a true professional. It was a masterclass in emotional intelligence. This is where the title's idea of her quitting takes on a new meaning. She didn't quit on her Olympic dream. She quit the drama. She refused to be drawn into the mudslinging and the politics. She essentially turned her back on the controversy, letting her silence and her continued on-court performance speak for itself. In doing so, she won an even bigger victory in the court of public opinion. She showed the world that while others were trying to tear her down, she was above the fray. Her classy response was a quiet act of rebellion, a move that only amplified the criticism against the committee and cemented her status as the people's champion. The fallout from the decision was immediate and messy, creating a public relations nightmare for both Team USA and the WNBA. The selection committee and the chosen players were suddenly on the defensive, forced to answer uncomfortable questions about why the sport's biggest star was excluded. But their attempts to justify the decision only seemed to dig the hole deeper. Some players who made the team tried to downplay the controversy, but their comments often came across as defensive, further fueling the narrative of veteran jealousy. Diana Taurasi, a legend of the sport who had previously made dismissive comments about how Clark would fare in the pros, became a focal point of the criticism. Whether fair or not, she was seen by many as the leader of the old guard, a symbol of the establishment's resistance to the new wave. The entire affair cast a dark shadow over what should have been a celebratory moment for women's basketball. The conversation was no longer about the incredible talent heading to Paris. It was about the one player who wasn't. The controversy threatened to overshadow the Olympic Games themselves, and with many fans declaring they wouldn't even watch Team USA play without Clark on the roster, it raised serious questions about the future leadership of the sport. Was the selection process broken? Was it too influenced by player politics and personal grudges? This decision exposed a deep fracture within women's basketball, a generational divide between the players who built the league and the new superstar who was taking it to unprecedented height. The long-term damage to the Team USA brand could be significant. They had presented themselves as a meritocracy, but this decision made them look like an exclusive club more concerned with protecting its own than with winning or growing the game. The future was now uncertain, with a lingering question of whether this self-inflicted wound would ever fully heal. As the dust begins to settle, one thing has become crystal clear. The attempt to sideline Caitlin Clark, to dim her spotlight and put her in her place, has failed spectacularly. In fact, it has achieved the exact opposite. The controversy has made her an even bigger, more sympathetic figure than she already was. She became the underdog, the people's champion who was wronged by a petty and out-of-touch system. The story of her snub generated more headlines and more discussion than if she had simply been named to the team. The outrage from figures like Stephen A. Smith, who confirmed the absurdity of the decision for a mainstream audience, elevated her from a sports star to a cultural icon. The decision that was meant to be a lesson in humility for a rising rookie ended up being a lesson for the establishment. You can no longer ignore the will of the people. This entire saga, the shocking omission, the flimsy excuses, the media firestorm, and Clark's powerful, dignified response, has solidified her place at the center of the sports universe. So, we are left with a final thought-provoking question. Did the committee's decision, born out of what many believe was jealousy and fear, inadvertently become the single greatest marketing event of Caitlin Clark's career? By trying to keep her off the world's biggest stage, did they ironically ensure that she would own the conversation, proving that her influence can no longer be contained by any roster, any committee, or any rival? The game may be played on the court, but the battle for the future of basketball was just won without her taking a single shot.